Hello, Jacqueline. This is Connie, and I want to give you a little tutorial on the lesson planning. There was a video that did not get uploaded, it was corrupted, and I think it was over this section, so I want to make sure that you have this available to you. When designing the lesson plan, it's really important that you look at three things before you really start planning, because it's those three things that actually tell you what it is you're going to teach. It tells you what it's going to look like when you teach it. And finally, it says, this is how I'm going to measure it. So the what is it I'm going to teach, you will get in the standards. And you will come over here to the standard section. This is an LPA, and you notice I haven't done this part, the subject, the goal, the concept. If you want to do the subject, it's fine, because you do know if you're going to be teaching math or history or whatever. But I don't want you to write the goal in, and I don't want you to write the concept in. Not just yet. What I want you to do is come to the standard. When you open up the standards, you click edit, and then it'll take you to whatever standards you are going to be using. Now, what is very important now is for you, I just want to make sure that's working, is for you to, oh, come on, load. Select the standard that you are going to be using for your lesson for the day. We're not talking about lessons that are going to be strung out over a course of weeks. We're just talking about the one lesson that we are going to teach this day. Now, it could be part of many lessons, but right now we're just focusing on a single lesson plan. As such, if you are doing math or language arts, you will always come to the Common Core section first. And you'll get this screen that says English, Language Arts, or Math. And if you are doing any lesson, regardless if it's math, science, PE, anything, if you are going to be using language in any way, shape, or form, you must have an English Language Arts standard attached to the lesson, because it is this standard that tells you by grade level how the students should be responding and using language in their learning cycle, exchange with one another, or writing. So for this, I'm going to go into English Language Arts. Even though your lesson is in math, I'm going to go into English Language Arts. My computer's really slow, so I apologize for the delays. So when you open up the standard for English Language Arts, you will be prompted to identify your grade level. I'm going to take third grade in this case. And when I open up the third grade, it provides me with this information about reading, writing, listening, and speaking. If I know that the students, for what we're going to be doing today, I'm just going to have the students do a listening and speaking standard. But if I know the students are going to be listening, speaking, and writing, then I'm going to have a writing standard be part of the lesson plan. If I know they're going to be reading, I have to have reading be part of the lesson plan. So let's just say the students read part of a text, and then they are going to talk to one another about the text. They're going to create whatever ideas they're going to create, and then they're going to write those ideas down. Then you're going to need all three of these particular standards in your lesson plan. So just for today, we're going to keep it simple. And we're just going to say that they're going to be listening and speaking. So in this case, we have them, it says in listening and speaking, they're going to have comprehension and collaboration, presentation, and knowledge of ideas. So in light of the fact that I don't want the students to present, I just want them to engage in conversation in this particular lesson I'm going to do today. So I'm going to say that they are going to engage effectively in a range of collaborative discussions, one-on-one, group, and so on. This gives me the opportunity to say, okay, I'm going to have a class discussion or I'm going to have a paired discussion. So I want to do that. And then, I'm sorry, I had to leave because the phone rang. So try not to repeat myself. Anyway, so I know I'm going to be having some kind of discussion, and I know that it's going to be around a main idea from from information that they read. So the reading part has already taken place. So now they're going to discuss the reading that has already taken place. And they're going to do it so that they can find the main idea, determine that idea, and they're going to be able to discuss details that they read that are going to help them to support that. So I decide that's what I'm going to do with speaking and listening. And so here I say that is done. So I've chosen my standards. And I'm not through, however. I must now still go back and select more standards, add standards, well, so I add it to the unit. Then I'm going to go back and hold on. And I'm going to add another standard because regardless of the lesson that you're teaching, you must also identify English language development standards. So I'm going to open them up, and I already said that it was going to be in listening and speaking. And the reason that we have to add these is you cannot improve in language unless you use language. So for our purposes, you will identify one child, even though you may have a class filled with children who are English language learners. And the paradigm now is all children are English language learners, even if they are mono-English. And sometimes we have non-standard English speakers, but we also have standard English speakers. And the reason that we now incorporate all children as ELD is because when we are teaching, we're not just teaching a fluency, we're teaching to what's called proficiency. And what that means is within every subject matter, there is a specific language associated with that content. And it is our job to make the children aware of this specific language associated with the content. Because even now, some words that you use in, let's say, social studies mean something very different in language arts or in PE or in science. For an example, today I was talking to a student that said she was teaching, and she used the term pumpkin patch. And I said, while many of the students in her class may know what a pumpkin patch is, if students haven't ever gone to a pumpkin patch, they might not be able to follow along with the story she was telling, or if they've not seen one. But if you're an English language learner from a country where they don't have pumpkins, then you might know the word pumpkin from going to the store with your mother now, and you see these big orange globes, and someone says that's a pumpkin. And a patch could mean a piece of material that you put on your clothes in order to cover a hole. So while you're reading the story about a pumpkin patch to this child is visualizing a orange pumpkin-shaped patch that is on someone's clothes, and you're talking about taking your car there and having lunch in the pumpkin patch, and the child is totally confused. So I'm telling you this before I open this up. It's because There are certain kinds of strategies that help all children learn language, and they are called SADAI, and you're going to learn about this in other modules. And the teacher's strategies are called PSYOP, and we'll get into what those acronyms mean. However, the strategies and the activities work together to develop language. Children who speak English will benefit from using PSYOP, but they don't have to have the PSYOP model. Children who are learning to speak English and it is their second language can only effectively learn English when you do use these models. So I'm telling you this now so you'll understand the context of what I'm getting ready to open. So you go to your grade level here, and your grade level then says these are the strategies and applications. So again, this is the PSYOP and this is the SADAI. This is what the teacher does, and this is what the student's going to do. So what this says here is you now have levels of language, and we're going to pick an early intermediate student in the 3rd grade. And so an early intermediate student in speaking and listening, and we are going to talk about comprehension, organization. Let's see. Let's just look at comprehension and see if this is going to meet our need for our design of the lesson. They will begin to be understood when speaking, but may have some inconsistencies in grammar. They can ask and answer questions, and they can restate multi-step directions. And in organization, they can identify main points of simple conversations and stories that are read aloud, orally communicate basics, and recite familiar rhymes. Well, I think I want to use this one, orally identify the main points of a simple conversation and stories. And the reason I wanted to use this is I know that the children have already read the text, but they're going to refer back to their notes or whatever whatever we've gathered for evidence, and they're going to be talking about it because they're going to identify a main idea. So I'm going to click this one because I think that is best. But what I want you to know is, as an early intermediate level speaker who is developing language, this is what the student should be able to do. So you are working for your student to at least be at this level, to orally identify main points of a simple conversation and stories that are read aloud. So, and to use simple sentences. That is how you are going to structure your lesson so this child can use these skills. This child doesn't have mastery over language in the same depth as another child who's a mono speaker. So this child cannot write complex sentences or communicate with the same amount of depth. So we're looking at a different level of communication, but we still want the content to be there. I just want to show you if this was an intermediate child for the same area. As I open this one up, hopefully it will open soon. I do not understand what's going on with my computer today, but you know, sometimes it's great and sometimes it isn't. In this particular case, it says like identify main ideas with simple conversation. If this was an intermediate student, it says makes oneself understood when speaking by using consistent standard English. So we know this student is going to be stretched to become an intermediate level. But right now, this student is not there. So I just want you to know that these levels are always moving towards a development of language. And as teachers, when we're teaching, some children may be here when they're doing oral stuff, and they might be somewhere else when they're doing written things. They can be all over the map. So you have to understand how to read their language levels, and then understand what does that mean in their production, and then how do I address that now and then stretch them to move to the next level. You will learn about that further, and I will be coaching you on that at another time. But I needed for you to understand that you do have to come here, because when we talk about language adaptations, this is what we're talking about. So I'm going to go back here with I orally identify the main point, and they're going to add this to our lesson plan. So we're going to put this up here. And what I'm going to do is get rid of these, because these are from another lesson that I did, and we don't need to have these here. All right, so 3rd grade, kindergarten. Let's remove kindergarten. Now, what's really important for you to see is, now that we know the standards, we have English language and we have English language development. We can now close this. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry, I did the wrong one. We are done editing, and now this is going to close this window. And what we see here is every standard, regardless of what it is going to start with a verb. So we're just going to look at, I'm going to look at standard 2 because it's shorter. There's a lot of parts in standard 1. So we're just going to look at standard number 2. So let's say, let me go ahead and make a copy of this. And I'm going to move this down to the lesson objective. Okay. Now I'm going to place this here. Now in the lesson objective, I have to do this. I'm putting this here because I want you to understand how we are going to deconstruct the standard. In making an objective, we go back to the standard and we're going to look at it in 3 parts. The 3 parts are skill, content, and context. In this case, the skill is always the verb, and the verb will always be in the beginning. There may be several verbs, but you will always find a first verb. So in this case, determine is the verb. So that means that's what the students are going to do. They're going to get something that they're going to determine. The content is the object of the verb. In this case, the content is they're going to determine main ideas. They're going to determine supporting details. So this is, right here we have the skill, and then here and here we have the the content. The reason I extrapolate these out as the skill and content is students are going to determine main ideas in every single subject matter that they have. Students are going to determine supporting details in every single subject matter that they're going to experience in their K-12 environment. And they're going to determine main ideas and supporting details throughout their entire life. It is the context, it is the context of these main ideas that determine how they're going to go about thinking about these, determining the main ideas and the supporting details. In this case, they're going to determine the main ideas and supporting details of a text read aloud. That's a context. Another context is information presented. That's another context. And in this particular case, this context of information presented has its own context, because this could just be a presentation done by a bunch of kids in your class. But this right here says that they're going to also use information presented in diverse media formats. That's a very specific context, for determining main ideas and supporting details. So for for this, it says if I'm going to use this standard, that they are going to include visual, quantitatively, and or orally, meaning the different kinds of diverse media formats. So why is this important? It's important because now I have to craft the objective of the lesson. And an objective always has to have a measurable verb and content. And the verb and the content, or the skill and the content, are then going to be placed in a context. And it is in that context that I'm going to measure what they know. So in this case, if they've already read something, given this, that we looked at this, it's going to be diverse media formats. One of the formats can be a text. It says visual, quantitative, and orally. I'm just going to use a text here because that's just how I'm giving it to them right now. So what do I want the students to do? So the students will be able to what? Determine what? Main ideas from the notes taken from their informational text. Now, that's just part of what we're doing. So we know what the skill is. We're going to determine. And what are they going to determine? Main ideas. So we know what that looks like. And what is the format? Where are they getting these main ideas from? From their notes. So that's a context. Now we know where they're getting these things from. And where did they get these notes from? From their informational text. Okay? So now we know the context for these informational notes. However, we're dealing with listening and speaking. So I have to add something here, which is an oral component. So I could say the students will be able to, during a class discussion, determine main ideas and so on. During a class discussion means this is going to be listening and speaking. Because those are the two that I said that we're going to focus on. So they're going to be able to determine main ideas in a class discussion. So now I know where the skill, the content, and the context. I have written a measurable objective. I do want you to know that if a standard says they will know, understand, comprehend, use, know, understand, comprehend. I think that's it. These are not measurable in and of themselves. If you want the students to demonstrate understanding of whatever it is, you have to find a measurable skill that you can actually measure. You cannot measure understanding in and of itself. You cannot measure knowing in and of itself, nor comprehension. You have to test those things against something that is measurable. And to find verbs that will help you to do this, you want to go to Bloom's taxonomy. You can find Bloom's taxonomy online, and that's not the way you spell taxonomy. You can find Bloom's taxonomy online, and you will find a variety of verbs that will help you under categories such as understand. And these verbs will give you the skill verbs that mean to understand or to use or to know. Okay? So now we have written our measurable objective. So we're going to save this. And we're now going to go down here. I'm going to come back to language in a minute because we do have to write an ELD objective. We're going to come down here to the description of the assessment and the assessment type. So you have to decide what kind of assessment are you going to be using. Now, when an assessment means how am I measuring what the kids are giving me against whatever the standard I determine is what mastery will look at, and what kind of assessment is that going to be. Formative assessment is a learning phase assessment. This means the students are in the learning process. It's like taking a ski class. If you've never taken skiing, I don't like to ski, but I've done a few ski classes. While I'm falling down in that class, I am willing to listen to the ski instructor tell me how to put my feet and how to hold the poles and whatever it is I have to do. That's formative assessment. If I am taking that same ski class and it's now later in the day and I'm going down the black diamond slope and I fall and break my leg, that's a summative assessment. And that summative assessment says, at the end of the classes that I took, this is as good as it got for me to ski. And this is what I learned from that instructor. In this case, I didn't learn very much because first I'm on the wrong slope, and secondly, I broke my leg. So it's too late now for me to make an adjustment. It does not mean that you cannot use a summative assessment and revert to formative if you see that at the end of instruction, students still don't have the it or the concepts you were going for. Summative assessments are usually done at the end of the unit or the end of a week or end of a large block of learning. A formative assessment are usually those things that come along the way, and you're doing formative assessments all the time while you were teaching. Every second that you're teaching, you are assessing formatively. Are the students getting it? Let me ask some questions to see if they have it. Do the students have this? No, I need to back up. Do the students get this? They're always giving you data. These two right here, informal and formal, are just saying this is the methodology I'm going to use. So informal could be, while the kids are having this discussion, these are points that I'm going to be listening for in their conversation of a formative assessment. A formal assessment tends to go more along the line of a summative. A formal assessment could be a presentation that they're doing at the end of a unit or something. And then these two are traditional. I encourage you, at least for this, to pick a formative assessment. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to save those changes. Now, what this means is my assessment description now will be formative in nature, and I want to go back up here. And this is what we are assessing the students on. I am going to export down here in the assessment description both the standard and the objective that I have written above. Okay. Now the reason I'm doing that is because I don't want to keep flipping back and forth. You do not have to do that. However, if it makes it easier for you to write your standard, your assessment, feel free to do so. So I know for this assessment that the students are going to participate in a class discussion. And in this discussion, they're going to determine main ideas from notes that we took from an informational text. So I'm going to first start with that. So the students will, during a class discussion, the students will determine the main idea about Mickey Mouse. M-I-C-K-E-Y M-O-U-S-E from the notes taken yesterday after the reading. Okay. Okay, so this lets you know that they read something on Mickey Mouse yesterday, they took notes on it, and now they're going to use those notes to determine the main idea. You are going to also say, what are the things that are determining the main idea? So we're going to say, in this particular case, they should be able to identify Mickey as a mouse. They should know where he lives. They should know his girlfriend. Minnie. Is it EY? I don't know. I don't do Mickey Mouse. And they should be able to describe his clothes. No. Yeah, they should be able to describe his clothes. In this case, he's wearing a sailor suit. And what's important about this is because he is the captain. The context is Mickey is the captain on a cruise ship. Okay, so this is the evidence that they're going to be able to identify. Oh, and they should also be able to describe his vehicle. Okay, and it is a cruise ship. Okay, so they should be able to know that Mickey is the captain of a cruise ship by identifying the ship, his clothes. His girlfriend is interesting. Where he lives is interesting, but those things were in the story because Disneyland will be his exit port, his de-embark. Is that right? De-embarkation point. And they need to identify him as a mouse. Okay, so now I know what is the evidence that the children are going to use for defining the main idea, determining the main idea that Mickey is the captain of a cruise ship, and that they're going to get this from the notes that they took yesterday. These are the things that I'm going to want to see in their, I don't know if I spelled it right now, I don't care. In their conversation. So these are all identifiable pieces that I should hear them say during their conversation. And if they are able to give me if they are able to give me sailor suit, describe the ship, say he is he's the captain of the cruise ship, and that he has embarkation, the embarkation point, I will give them 100%. That's 100% is mastery. So in this case, I'm just making these check marks. You would want to write this out. They're able to give me the things that I gave those pluses to. That is 100% mastery. If they are able to also provide additional information about his girlfriend or something else, I might say I will give them additional. If they give me less than those, so let's say they only give me 1, 2, 3, 4, okay, there are 5 points. Oh, they're 5 points. Then they get 100%. If they give me 3 points, that might constitute, 70% towards mastery. And maybe that's the cutoff point. I would probably make that the cutoff point, however, for my ELD student. And then finally, if they give me a lot of extraneous, I'm going to say that they did not meet the level for mastery. And you have to articulate that. You have to be able to say what mastery looks like. Okay, once you've done that, there's several things that you know here. Is that number one, they're going to discuss this. Number two, they're going to be able to use their notes to find this information, and they're going to be able to support whatever it is that Mickey is a captain of a cruise ship by using this information in the conversation. So now you have your assessment. Oops, I don't want to do that. I'm going to do this. Once I have those three things done, I now have aligned my standard, my instruction, and my outcome with my objective. Everything else now is almost a fill in the blank. So let's come back up here. We know that it's language arts. In this particular case, the goal for here is that the students will be able to use evidence to support an opinion. That's my overall goal for this lesson. Students will use evidence to support opinions and main ideas. Opinions. Oh my God. That's the overall objective of what the thing that we're doing, period. Okay? So that's this lesson, which is that. Then here, the concept today, for this lesson today, is that they are going to use evidence to support, is that they're going to determine main idea and support with evidence. And the main idea, okay. That's what we're going to do today. We're going to determine main idea and support with evidence. That's it. We know what the Common Core standard is. We know the English Language Development Standard. Now, excuse me, I don't want to go there just yet. We know that. We know what the objective is, and we know what the assessment is. Okay? Where's the assessment? Language, excuse me, I'm sorry about running this in front of you, but it's really important that I get there. I'm tired. Oh, it didn't keep my written assessment. I don't know why I didn't keep it. God. Oh, there it is. I don't know why I didn't show it, but that's the assessment. Okay, save changes. We know it's there. There, now it's there. That's really odd. All right, so now we're going to come back up here, and we're going to look at language. In this particular case, we know the grade level is 3rd grade. I'm not going to change that. When it says content objective, we've got that. But when it says language objectives, it's really referring to the wedding of what is it that they're going to do in just plain old English language arts, and what is it that this student is capable of who is an early intermediate ELD in order to satisfy my goals for this lesson. In this particular case, I know that the child is going to speak orally. They will be able to identify the main ideas, and they're going to be able to talk about it using simple phrases or sentences. So we're going to come down here. Language objective. We know that they're going to be listening and speaking. So for this, I'm going to write the student. I'm going to write that the students will be able to participate in the discussion using simple phrases and what was the other one? Simple phrases and words or something, whatever it is. That's why you always got to know where your objectives are, and words to support the main idea. that's the evidence that I'm going to be looking at in their conversation. Okay, they don't have to use the total conventional English language. Okay, so now I know what their language skill is going to look like, but it's really important that you know that right here, identify orally. Even if this was a written assignment, you wouldn't ask this kid to write. You might ask him to write, but you would accept an oral response from this child as a measure for content, but pushing the child to expand in development, you would then ask the child to also do something written. But you're not going to grade it the same because this child can't use total conventional English language. But you are teaching the child to use the English language. So down here in the assessment, I have to come back here one more time. And I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to open this back up again. And I am going to write for this assessment that for my adaptation for ELD is the student will orally identify the supporting issue, evidence, and the main idea. Oh, for their main idea, excuse me. They can use simple phrases or words. They will also speak to the group and to me. Okay, there you go. So now I have how I'm going to measure it. Everything else now is fill in the blank. Once you know this, everything is going to be fill in the blank. Now it's like, well, how do I plan on teaching this? So initially when you're learning to teach, and the one thing that you're always going to do is some kind of direct instruction. Even in inquiry, you do direct instruction because you got to tell them how to do stuff. So when you come here, you're going to have direct instruction. However, in this particular case, we are also going to have some collaborative, let me see, we have direct instruction, and I'm going to do just some collaborative learning, because the way I'm going to structure this is for the children to talk to one another and to come to an agreement. But I'm still going to do direct instruction because I have to let them know what it is they're going to do. Then we want you to write out whatever materials you're going to need for this lesson, because we want you to be prepared. Teachers lose so much time when they're running around trying to find the materials that they should have had readily available to them before they even start the instruction. I'm going to go back up here. Incorporating 21st century skills. In this particular case, the students are going to be using communication and collaboration because they're going to be speaking and talking with one another. Here we have the adaptations, and the adaptations are talking about this list. Now, you may have a class that has all of these things in them, or children that need these kinds of adaptations. Just pick Sadai right now. Do not pick a whole bunch of stuff, because if you start picking all these things, you have to show the adaptations in your lesson for every single one of them. And right now I want you to concentrate just on second language students. So you picked your adaptation, Sadai. You haven't gotten to this unit yet, but what this means is, you know the adaptation I wrote below for the what the ELD student was going to do to participate? Here I'm going to say, because I know in my head what it looks like, is the student will work with a partner that is empathetic and has a relationship with the ELD student. They will come to consensus on main ideas and participate in the class and group discussions as one voice. Okay, so now I know that there's going to be a kid they're going to work with. They're going to talk about the main ideas with one another, and they are going to present to the class during the discussion as one voice, and they will alternate speaking. I'm going to use this because I know that if the child has an opportunity to practice their responses prior to speaking in front of the group, and if there's somebody with them to support them, they will speak with much less of an effective filter. All right. And then finally, the adaptations here. This is our different kinds of considerations. You have to know your class. You cannot teach whom you do not know. So this part will be written out in as much detail as possible, and you really have to dig. You have to demonstrate that you know these kids and that you know that they're different, they have different needs. Sometimes those needs have been identified as special education. They are things that you have observed about the children. You need to write all that down. This takes about 2 hours to write the first time you write it. But once you write it, you can then cut and paste it on all the other lesson plans associated with this class. Down here, while you may have all those considerations in your classroom because of who the class is, do not pick all of these, because if you do, I have to see an adaptation for every single one. In this case, you are only going to pick the EL. And then you're going to write down any anticipated difficulties with this child. And you can get an anticipated difficulty direct from the ELD standard above, which is the child is still developing English and will need more support in identifying the main idea evidence and in constructing responses. So we know that, and that could be the one that we decide. And we could say they're shy. They are shy. That might be an observation. And to help them prepare for speaking to the class, they will work in tandem with a partner. There you go. So now I have written out what I anticipate. This kid's going to have a hard time talking, and this kid is going to have a little bit of time constructing responses. Okay, that's my difficulty. This is how I plan on dealing with it. So now I know all of that. It's time to get to the lesson itself. Materials, I already talked about that. Okay. I have videos, I think, up there that deal with what it is you're going to do for the lesson. What is important for you to know here is that the open is the hook. The open is tapping into what the child may or may not know about a particular subject matter and getting the brain ready to take on this new information to make sense of it. In this case, if the kids read the story on Mickey Mouse the day before, then the kids, you could open this with, let's have a quick review of the story that we read yesterday about Mickey Mouse. And you could say, I want you to talk to each other about Mickey Mouse, and I want you to pick one thing that you thought was really interesting about that story and Mickey Mouse. And then you would come back to the class and ask them to give you their responses, and you write it down. You've done a lot of things. You've tapped into prior knowledge. You have had kids who may have forgotten the story, remember the story through conversation with a partner. You've allowed the kids to exchange information and engage in the information without you telling them, Mickey Mouse did this and did that. But you created a hook somewhere. Now they're primed and ready to take on the new information. You have to describe that in detail. I'm going to ask the kids to do this. Then I'm going to put them in their A-B partnerships. I'm going to say, A, I want you to talk to B. And B, I just want you to listen to what A has to say. And then they're going to reverse it. Then I'm going to say they can discuss it. This will take 90 seconds. I will then ask the children to share responses that they discussed, and from the prompt of picking one thing that they thought was interesting. And I will write those on the overhead or the board or wherever you're going to put them. And I'm doing this to help the children remember and to get them ready for the next part of the lesson. My hope is some of the things that they say here about what they thought was important will help them in identifying the main ideas in their notes. So then you go to the next section. Now this is the body of the lesson. And again, you have to narrate it. You can't say, I explained this. If you're going to explain it, then you have to really be specific. This is exactly how I explained it. I'm going to do it this way. So in this case, with this particular objective, I am going to model how to determine main idea, but I'm not going to use Mickey Mouse. I am going to use something else. I'm going to use something very accessible. I might quickly read them The Three Little Pigs. And then from that, I might show them, because I already have some main ideas about The Three Little Pigs, I'm going to show them that I think the main idea of The Three Little Pigs is that the wolf was a terrible person. And what is my evidence? He huffed and puffed and he blew all these houses down. There, I've identified the main idea from my notes, and this supports the fact that I think that the wolf is a terrible person or a terrible animal. You have to say, I'm going to do this. From this, I am then going to model how to think about determining main ideas. So I'm going to do a think aloud, and you write down exactly what you're going to do and say. Then you tell the children, all right, now let's do another one together. You can't just say, do you understand? You have to actually say, let's do one together. So maybe you ask them to do a main idea on one of the pigs. Maybe the pig that built the house that was made out of brick. I don't know. That would be your choice. Because this is the we do together part of direct instruction. So now the kids go through the we do of direct instruction about the Three Little Pigs, and together as a class, you are able to show them, based on this evidence, this is the main idea for this little pig, and this little pig was very smart because he built his house made out of brick. Because how do we know that? Because his other two brothers are dead and they don't have any home. Then finally, for this, you say, once you're sure that they know how to do it, you can do one of two things. If you're not sure, like in math, you can say, I'm going to give you one problem and I want you to do it by yourselves. At that point, you're walking around the room watching the kids do it. This is guided instruction. Guided instruction sometimes can stop with, tell me about the pig who did the brick, because you saw that they understood how to do it, or you still need one more little piece just to make sure they know how to do it. Once you know that they know, at least 80% of your class needs to know how to do this. If less than 80% knows, then you have to reteach something. But if 80% knows, you can dismiss the class to do the independent work. Give them the directions. You're going to, in small groups, you're going to do this, you're going to talk about that, and you're going to come to consensus on blank. Okay? So then but you have to also tell them, I'm going to then put them into groups. They're going to have 10 minutes to do this, and this is the graphic organizer I'm going to give them in order for them to record their responses. While they're working, the 20% of your class, which should be no more than 3 to 4 kids, you can pull aside and remediate them while the rest of the class is working. When they've done that, now you pull the whole class together and then you do whatever debrief you're going to do. Your debrief can be the close, but you said you were going to have a class discussion, so I'm going to be looking for a class discussion somewhere in the body. And then for the close is not they're going to go home and do homework, or on Friday they're going to take a spelling test. The close relates to the lesson that you gave today, right now. And it's a way for the children to think about their thinking, to think about what they learned, to process it in a way that, number one, they know that this lesson has come to a close, but number two, they actually walk away with something. You can easily ask them to pair share what they thought was the most important thing they learned today, and then walk around the room and listen, and then have a few kids provide you with responses. You can ask them to do a ticket out the door. Now, to me, if ticket out the door does not mean I'm collecting it and then looking later to see who got the right answer. A ticket out the door means you have to be able to do this before you leave this room, because it's a formative assessment. It's telling you who does not get it. If you get 5 kids walk up to you out the door getting ready to go to lunch, and 5 of them, the first 5, don't know how to do this, take a 6th and then say, you know what, everybody, I'm going to collect these now because I think there's some confusion. And then the next day, you're going to be able to know, I have to reteach this. That's the lesson cycle. It's an introduction, and then it's an I do, the teacher does, we do it together for guided practice. Guided practice can go to 2 different levels, and then you do, which is independent practice. You do not release kids to independent practice until you know that 80% of the kids can do whatever it is you're asking them to do. And you will find that you will have fewer classroom problems when you know 80% of the kids can do it, because they'll do it. When you have lots of classroom problems, it's because the kid doesn't know what to do, and the only way they know how to let you know is to act out. That is your own personal tutorial for lesson planning. I want you to, after you finish listening to this, I want you to go back and look at the lesson that you submitted for the observation next week and see if you can make these changes. I really appreciate the attempt that you did, because it gave me a framework, and I'm sorry that you missed that session and that one of the videos was missing. But this is your own personal copy, my dear, so I hope that you find it helpful. Let me know. Bye-bye.